The Constitutional Court has ruled that independent candidates need only 1,000 signatures to register for the upcoming 2024 provincial and national elections. INkantolo YoMthethosisekelo inqume ukuthi abangenele ukhetho abazimele badinga kuphela 1,000 signatures ukuze babhalisele ukhetho oluzayo lwezifundazwe nolukazwelonke lonyaka ka-2024. The question we're asking mbukeli namuhla ohlelweni, does this make things easier for the independent candidates to contest the elections? Ngelele sikwamukela ohlelweni Asikhulume. Let's talk. Igama lami ngingubongiwe umakhumalo kwakwazwane. Sikhumbuze ke mbukela ukuthi ungaba ingxonya lolu hlelo ngokushayela ucingo sizo umbono noma umbuzo wakho. Inombolo zethu zocingo 011-714-0677 noma 011-714-0678. Kanti ungabuye futhi usithole emakhasini ethu okuxhumana mbukeli ku Twitter @SABC Izindaba kanye na ku Facebook SABC Izindaba. Ukuze kubelula ke mbukeli sicela uqale ngo #Asikhulume #SABC News bese ke ubhala umbuzo noma umbono wakho. Asikhulume. Mbukeli, ngemuva kwesinqumo senkantolo YoMthethosisekelo ngalabo abazongenela ukhetho abazimele ama-independent candidates, intatheli yethu uNokubonga Hlatshwayo ukhulume nosihlalo weCommission wenhlangano i-IEC umnumzane uMusuthu Myepya mayelana nokuthi bathini ngalesi sinqumo.
INkantolo YoMthethosisekelo egcineni sikhiphe isinqumo sayo ngezinselelo zomthetho ukuchishiyela kwezokhetho.
We are happy that the period of uncertainty has now been dealt with and there is clarity on the matter. There are issues that are consequential to the judgment, but in the overall scheme of things, we are very happy with where we are. The court has made it known what the clear position should be. It is the court of final instance, and so ordinarily there should not be any comeback.
Laba abafuna ukungenela ukhetho ngaphandle kwamaqembu noma inhlangano phecelezi ama-independent candidates bazodinga kuphela ama-signature ayi-1,000 ukuze bangenelele ukhetho lango-2024.
The court thought 1,000 signatures should be the entry point at this level, and not 15% of the signature of the 15% of the quota of the votes that gave you a seat in a legislature or the National Assembly. We do not know how many parties and independent candidates are going to contest, but a deposit and a signature and other things that are necessary, of course, to contest as a candidate in an election are important, that they must be considered together to come to a point where real contestants or contestants that are meaningful and will stand a good chance of winning an election are allowed to participate in an election.
INkantolo YoMthethosisekelo isichithile isicelo sama-Independent Candidates Association sokuthi isibalo sezihlalo zeParliament lakazwelonke zama-independent candidates azongenela ukhetho ngonyaka ozayo sinyuke sisuke ku-200 siye ku-350.
Let's deal with a few things. There is an urban legend that says independent candidates need more votes than a party to win a seat in the National Assembly. That is an urban legend, as I've said. The quota for a seat is the same quota for independent candidates as it is for political parties. In other words, if in the provincial legislature of Gauteng, you need 40,000 seats to win, 40,000 votes to win one seat. That's what it takes for an independent. If an independent gets 40,000 votes, they get a seat. A party gets 40,000, they get the first seat. And so it is equal.
Namuhla ohlelweni sikhuluma ngezomthetho wokuchishiyela kwezokhetho. Asikhulume.
Mbukeli, the court also ruled that a provision in the Act regarding seats allocation in the National Assembly passed constitutional muster, even though it was argued that independent candidates will have to get many more votes per seat than political party candidates. Asingite kabanzi loku asamukele izihamebli zethu umnumzane Terry Tselane, Executive Chairman of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa and former Vice-Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of South Africa. Kanye no Dkt Michael Louis, Chairman of the Independent Candidate Association. Asamukele nobabili on the show. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Let me start with you, in fact, and start with your reaction to the ruling.
Yes, thank you very much, Pungiwe. Well, obviously, it's a week now since the ruling, and you know, when a court of first instance comes in with a judgment and says that they believe that there's no merits for that we didn't prove our case. Obviously, that was quite a harsh judgment, because we really believe that we went and did our work with actuaries and to be able to come forth with a hugely expensive court case. And obviously, a week now that's gone past, I must say that even although we definitely accept the judgment, we are still convinced that our scenario is correct, and that we understand that this is a highly technical, complicated issue. And we have come to the resolve that we stick to our position, that it is so that an independent candidate will need more votes than a political party to obtain a seat in the National Assembly.
And for you, Mr. Tselane, does that, you know, is it something that makes, I would say, sense loosely, you know, when it comes to the arguments that are being posed here? Because I've spoken to some independent candidates as well, and they say that this judgment is harsh, but they do appreciate the fact that now the threshold is lower. But is it something that is going to make things easier for them going forward? Yeah,
in my opinion, I think it's a fairly balanced judgment. In a sense that, remember that the first part of the judgment deals with the allocation of seats in the National Assembly. Now, you may be aware that in terms of the Constitution, you require, or the Constitution determines that there should not be more than 400 seats in Parliament. Now, what the independents were trying to contest was that that arrangement where now that 400 seat is divided in terms of 200 that is contested by candidates, independent candidates, and 200 allocated for political parties was unfair. And they wanted it to be 350 to 50 allocation, so that you've got the 400 ultimately. But the Constitutional Court, relying on the Atkins report, found out that, in fact, if you are allocating according to 200 to 200, you've got less risk of what they call overhang. What is overhang? Overhang is basically excessive seats. In other words, you've got more people elected into the National Assembly than the number of seats available. So you've got 400 seats, you end up now with 402 people who qualify to be in the National Assembly. Already, it's unconstitutional. So they had to find something that would still fit within the 400. So according to them, the 350 to 50 was going to lead or had more risk of leading to overhang or excessive seats. So that's the first aspect, and that's why they decided that the 200-200 split is rational. The second aspect then deals with the requirement for a candidate to participate as an independent candidate. That, as you indicated at the beginning, firstly, the Electoral Amendment Act was saying the independent candidate, together with political parties who are now new entrants, should have 15% of what it would have required to get a seat in a legislature or a National Assembly in the previous elections. And that, of course, was going to be onerous for independent candidates who do not have the infrastructure compared to the political parties. And the Constitutional Court decided to use the standard that had already been established, where political parties since 2021 would have required 1,000 signatures in order to be able to contest the election. So it's already there in the legislation. And what the Constitutional Court did was just to say, instead of actually requiring independent candidates to get about 10,000 signatures of registered voters, let's rather stick with what we already have in the legislation, with this 1,000 signatures. That is currently the requirement.
And Michael, I wonder, does it make it easier for you then, especially that part of the signatures, because it was one of those that was seen by some of the candidates as onerous?
Yes, I think that is correct. Obviously, we elated about that, and it does make it easier. But I'd like to, well, first I'd like to say Terry's submission is 100% correct. The only thing is that, and I also listened to the chairman of the IEC's submission before that, the interpretations is correct. On the first 200, it is that independent candidates and political parties have got the same allocation. But what they don't carry on to say is that that is not the final allocation for political parties. The final allocation for political parties will only come in when the balance of the 200 seats come in, the compensatory seats, where the seats that are of the first 200 are subtracted. And the case will be, Bongi, where we're going to see it coming through because we have to prove our case. There is going to be cases where an independent candidate will get 57,000 votes and not get a seat in Parliament, while a political party will get 43 or 45,000 votes and will get a seat. So it's for our case to prove. So unfortunately, the problem that we've got, and I listened to an interview with Zaki Ahmad over the weekend, his campaign now has already cost him 3 million to 5 million rand. And the problem that we've got is with my independent candidates in our association. They're saying, why must they spend 3 to 5 million rand and take a risk of getting 90,000 votes or 78,000 votes and then not getting a seat while a political party gets 43 or 45,000? So it goes about a question of risk. So I must say, to the question of the signatures, whilst it makes it easier for them to get in, the main problem is the number of votes to get a seat and the risk they need to take for the capital that they need to raise for their campaigns.
And I want us to talk about that when we come back from the break, as to how then does, does the IEC and also everybody involved resolve then this particular issue and even help the viewers understand how the seats are allocated. Mbukeli, akasithi shelele 8.7. Ukhetho. Dkt Tselane, I'm going to come back to you. Let's talk about these allocations then, because what Michael is raising is very critical, because ultimately, if you are then going to enter and you enter the election as an independent candidate, you are then getting a certain number of seats. You've paid so much money and all of that, but a political party only just needs to get slightly lesser than you. Is that a fair assessment? Is it a fair look? Does it work that way? So let's talk to the viewers about how it all works.
Okay. Let me start from the beginning. The system that is used for allocation of seats, you find it in Schedule 1 of the Electoral Act. Now, that system is structured this way. You take firstly the total number of valid votes. You divide that by the available number of seats plus 1, and it gives you a quota. That quota is the quota that we're going to be using for allocation of seats. So if a particular candidate has received a particular number of votes, you take that number, you divide it according to the quota that you have received after you have done the allocation that I've spoken about. So that is how the seats are going to be allocated. So that obviously is going to be the system that is used to allocate the seats. However, what I appear to be hearing is that because an independent candidate will only qualify for 1 seat, even if you have received more votes, those votes will in any case fall away. Unlike for political parties, those seats, even if you did not win a seat, those votes will still be used for the purpose of the allocation for your proportional representation arrangement. You know, so I think it's a risk that is there in terms of participation. An independent candidate cannot get more than one seat, and therefore political parties have an advantage in a sense that those votes do not basically disappear. They're still going to be used for the determination of the total number of seats that a political party would then receive.
Dr. Louis, there's something else, you know, that our viewers were asking about, and I was also asking myself about, is that, so let's say the election comes and the candidates under your organization gets a seat. For example, I'm going to make one example. One candidate gets a seat, and then unfortunately, that candidate either can no longer continue to serve in Parliament due to maybe ill health or something happens there. How does that work? Do you replace them, or is that seat going to be vacant?
Yes, so I'll answer that from you. I just want to ask Terry, because the sense is that this question that you first asked, Terry, is not well interpreted by him, and he knows these laws so well. It's not to say that that he was wrong, but I wanted to say the problem with us is not lost seats. The problem with us is that an independent candidate in the regions, in the 9 provinces, needs to get 80 to 90,000 seats. So they don't get a seat and there's no lost seats. The problem that it is when the seats of the regions and the compensatory seats are added together and divided by 400, the political party is going to get less seats. They need less votes to get a seat. And as a result, we're going to sit with a scenario that an independent candidate that didn't get the threshold of 80 to 90,000 seats won't get a seat, but a political party of 43 walls. So I just wanted to put that clear, just because it is complicated.
I'll get him to answer that.
Thanks, Bungi. Now, and just regarding the replacement, we also went to the court with recalculation, because once somebody dies or resigns, there's the Electoral Act says that the votes will all be recalculated to get the new allocation of the seat. And we did, once again, our actuary submitted that when there's a recalculation of the seats, that it always favors the bigger, larger political parties, and the new political parties will then most probably always gain that seat. So what happens if they resign? There's a recalculation. And we took that to the Court to believe that that was unconstitutional. We also believed our submission to the courts, where they believed it was a split judgment on that, but they believed that it did pass the rationality test and our merits didn't hold.
Okay, very briefly, let's answer the seats question, because I've got another question that's burning to ask you as well.
Okay. So I'm not too sure what aspect Dr. Louis is actually referring to. But the allocation of seats is not predetermined by the number of votes that would be required for a person to get a seat. It will only be determined when you take the valid votes cast and then you divide it, you use the formula that is there in Schedule 1 of the Electoral Act, as I've indicated. So that's the starting point. So you can't start a process by saying that in order for you to be able to get a seat in Parliament, you will require so many votes. We don't know at this stage how many votes are going to be required for a person or for a political party to get a seat. It is only when you now take in consideration, in compliance with Schedule 1 of the Electoral Act, once you take in consideration the total number of valid votes, you divide it according to the number of available seats, plus 1, so that you can get a quota and use that quota for the purpose of determination of how many votes you actually require.
That's quite an interesting one. But there's something else that, you know, I was thinking about, especially after the ruling and now this 1,000 signatures threshold. How long is the ballot paper likely to be now?
Well, I've heard the Parliament saying that we are likely to have a booklet, but I think it's very unlikely.
So if let's say we have a booklet, Is it possible to wrap up in a day then?
No, it's not. I mean, it would obviously have implications for quite a number of things. But I think it's just a scarecrow. The truth of the matter is that I don't think you will have so many independent candidates participating. And if a political party is participating in that regional ballot, that political party is not going to be showing the list of all its candidates. You will just see a political party's logo, and name, and abbreviation, and then you will have independent candidates apart from the political parties. In general, I mean, even in national elections, you don't have like thousands of political parties participating, even though you've got 600 political parties that are, more than 600 political parties that are registered. Not all of them contest the elections because there are other requirements that would make it difficult for some of the political parties to participate. But some of the political parties also register in order to participate only in municipal elections and not in national elections. So I don't think that the ballot paper is going to be unmanageable.
All right. When we come back from the break, Dr. Louis, I want to hear from you then that should going forward post-2024, the country relook the electoral system in its current form? Does it work for independent candidates or other aspects that you are hoping post-2024 you can then be able to relook? But we have that conversation in mbukeli masibuya edo. Sespeta, I guess, ukuthi, is it time for South Africa to review its electoral system? Dr. Louis, I'm going to come to you.
Yes, thank you. Well, just regarding the electoral ballot, I just quickly want to make a quick comment regarding that. I really believe it's fear-mongering. I want to add what Terry said. You must remember we're going to vote in regions now. So as a result, the ballots are going to be divided by 9, where nationally in the past, it was always one big ballot. But I'm wanting to say to you that Zaki Ahmad said his campaign day number was 3 million to date, and he needs another 5 million, which is 8 million, to complete his campaign as an independent candidate. I know how many members I've got in my Independent Candidates Association. There is no ways that we're going to have a flood of independent candidates. Absolutely impossible. They won't have the funds, and I do believe they'll take a huge risk. The only thing is I don't know is if there's anybody that won't get nominated by their political parties that they're going to jump ship and stand as independent candidates. But I really believe it's fear-mongering, and I don't think there's going to be a concern. Regarding the Electoral Act for independent candidates, of course, firstly, we never believed in the political system the minister chose. We don't believe an independent candidate can stand against a political party in a region or nationally. The only way it could work is a constituency-based system. And we really believe that the Electoral Act will very strongly consider, the electoral panel that's going to be nominated by the minister will strongly view and look at a constituency-based system. And then again, what the Van Zyl did nominate, they made the division 300-100 out of the 400. So my prediction is that we will see a much better system for independent candidates in the next Electoral Act, where I predict a constituency-based system with a 300-100 split. And that will really be very pleasing and good. And so we are maturing democracy. We need to completely keep on pushing the boundaries. And I believe that there's a place for independent candidates to get new voices, new faces, and strong leaders back onto the playing field. All right.
Dkt Tselane. I agree with Dr. Louis that there's got to be a fundamental transformation of the electoral landscape. The fact that now we've got independents contesting, we've got to really make it a point that people who are contesting as independents represent clearly identifiable constituencies. And the only way that we can actually be able to do that is to start a delimitation process in terms of which we're going to be cutting the country into proper constituencies. So I think the demarcation board would have to work very closely with the new panel in order to be able to divide the country into proper constituencies so that the people that get elected, they know that they're accountable to a particular constituency. But also I think we've got to begin to debate the issue of direct election of the president, so that Section 86 of the Constitution begins to be reviewed, which requires that members of the Assembly at their first sitting elect from amongst themselves a man or a woman who will be the president. So if we as a country begin to move to a situation where we elect the president directly, I think that would actually alleviate some of the concerns that people have.
And that is quite an interesting one, and I hope we get to speak about it next year to see how, on a practical term, does it all work out. Mbukeli, ngiyathemba ukuthi utholile okuncane ngokuthi ufunde just a bit more about this particular ruling, nokuthi mina nawe masiya okhethweni ngonyaka ozayo senze njani. What do we need to know? Independent candidates, how do you move forward, from this particular ruling? Kodwa asethembe nokuthi ingxoxo izoqhubeka einkundleni zethu zokuxhumana. Sibonge kakhulu kuwe ukuthi uhlanganyele kanye nathi nehambeli zethu umnumzane Terry Tselane, Executive Chairman of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, and he was also the former Vice-Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of South Africa. Kanye noDkt Michael Louis, Chairman of the Independent Candidates. Okakhumalo kwazwane nethimba le Asikhulume sithi nisale kahle.